all, Stacy the Blackfeather Intuitive, and welcome to Divinely Decked Tarot and Oracle Reviews done Stacy style. And first of all, I apologize for the lighting. This was my only day to do recordings, and it's just the timing of the year where the sun is just hitting my recording space in weird ways. So we are just going to do it where you get to see my hands. That's just the way it goes. Thank you for your patience. So today we're doing a review of a rock pool publisher deck called Saints&Mystics reading cards from Andres and Gracia. And the reason why I am doing this review today is because I've had this deck in my collection for at least 4 years. And I think I've maybe worked with it once or twice. So I thought, you know what, let's do a little review of it so that I can reacquaint myself with it, share it with you guys, and honestly, so I can decide whether it's something that I want to keep or whether it's time to rehome it, regift it out into the world. And I do have, I think, 1 or 2 other decks by Andre and Gracia. I like the decks that I work with. In fact, the other one I think is the Pure Magic Oracle, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Pure Magic Oracle, and I love this deck, and I work with this deck very often. Very different in its style, as you can see. But this one, like I said, I think I've worked with it maybe once or twice. So let's just kind of take a peek. So it is Rockpool Publishing, kind of what you would expect from Rockpool. Always good quality. They've got that flip top lid. I mean, it's just beautiful. The presentation of it is really stunning. And it's got a nice, a large guidebook. I think it's in color. Yes. So yes, everything is in color. It gives you the background of the saint or the mystic that's in there. It gives you an invocation, and kind of breaks down a lot of different things based on the card. So like this has an oracle meaning, spiritual, emotionally, spiritually, consciously. So it gives you a little bit of everything for each of the cards. Sometimes they're even giving quotes, which is interesting. And about the illustrator, about the author, acknowledgments. Okay, so let's take a peek and see what we got. So the card backs are really pretty. They're not reversible. They're large, so they're like I want to say like a standard oracle size, maybe slightly longer. They are on, I want to say, sort of like a shiny-ish cardstock, but not too bad. Decent quality, what you would expect from like a US Games or a Rockpool. Here we have St. Josephine Bakhita release. And so we're having, it's kind of that collage energy. We're having more modern, you know, the realism imagery. So seeing almost like a photograph, but not quite. I'm liking the doves in the imagery here. St. Francis healing, loving the animals. Of course, St. Francis is the patron saint of animals, was very much about the animals and the spiritual world. So that makes a lot of sense. Florence Scovel Shin, intuition. So she, if I'm understanding correctly, she's one of the kind of the heavy hitters that started mysticism and spiritualism and that kind of thing. So it makes sense that she's connected to intuition. William Blake, creative channel. So of course we know him as a very famous poet. And the idea here is that he is a creative channel. That's how he received his information. Michel de Nostradam, so Nostradamus, premonitions, makes sense. He was a big predictor. Saint Teresa, Saint Therese, divine ecstasy. So that must be connected to her mythology, her history. I'm not familiar with it. Saint Christopher, soul journey. Saint Christopher, I believe, is the patron saint of police officers and things of that nature. So kind of interesting that he's connected to soul journey. It would be interesting to read up on why he's been chosen. And we're seeing, you know, a modern depiction, you know, a little bit of the muscles. Obviously there's enlightenment that's happening here. He's got some kind of shield behind him. Harry Houdini, mastery. So this is kind of interesting. You know, we're bringing in, I want to say, Saints and Mystics, even from the fairly modern times. I mean, Harry Houdini, I believe, was like alive in like 1890s into the early 1900s, if I'm not mistaken. I like that he's mastery. So, kind of like that Merlin-esque energy. Maya Deren, immersion. Don't know who this person is, but definitely feeling like there's some modern energy here. We're seeing numbers and we're seeing sacred geometry. Also, a very sensual approach here. So, somebody probably more modern. Plato, student of the universe, makes a lot of sense. We've got a lot of wisdom and knowledge from him. Helena Blavatsky, initiations. So again, kind of like Florence Shin, so Chauval Shin. Sorry, I get the names all wrong because I don't know all of the history of it. I believe this is another one that was one of the first kind of heavy hitters of mysticism and spiritualism coming in. Saint Valentine, divine love. That's an obvious one. Saint Expedite, interesting. Expedite, immediacy, expedited, immediate, makes sense. So some of this I feel like I could learn about some of these saints and mystics. I'm not necessarily really overly drawn to the cards themselves. Maybe it's because it's more of a modern feel. I don't really have a lot of, I want to say, like photograph type decks in my collection at all. It's just not something that I've ever really been overly drawn to. And so maybe that's why there's some disconnect with this deck. St. Mary MacKillop, life lessons. So don't know who this saint is. St. Joseph, divine creation. That's really pretty. Holding the baby, married, St. Joseph. So that's Jesus's father, I'm assuming, and that's why the baby has the halo on his head. St. Martha, authority. That's interesting. Reminds me a little bit of like Kuan Yin and the 40 hands. Marie Laveau, respect. So I feel like I know her from from the slave times, her breaking out of doing something really brave and courageous to break out of slave times, I believe. Slavery, respect, owning respect, wanting and earning respect. I love that. Saint Barbara, empowerment. Oh, I love this image. This image speaks to me, kind of like this image speaks to me. So I wonder, what is the difference between these images and some of the other images that I'm seeing where I'm not really called to it, right? So, that could just be like a personal thing for me. It could also just be the way the cards are created. Sometimes I find some of this stuff a little cheesy. Sometimes I like a little cheese, sometimes not so much. But I love this. I love this imagery here. Same with this. I love this imagery. Dion Fortune, ceremony. Pulling a lot of ceremony in. Carl Jung, collective unconscious. Okay. So again, I feel like this deck could be like a learning deck, working with it to learn about these saints and mystics. Isaac Newton, discovery. You can also use it just for the keyword on the card. And I think if I were to continue to keep this in my collection and use it, that's how I would use it. I would use it for the keyword on the card, but not necessarily for the imagery. Saint Sebastian, resilience. And so, wow, he's been, arrowed, shot through the heart, shot in a number of different places with an arrow and still walking, still alive. That's kind of interesting. Saint Joan of Arc, conviction. So I know Joan of Arc. I understand that. Emanuel Swedenborg, spirituality. So probably another one of those heavy hitters. Santa Muerte, holy death. So I understand that, Saint Death. Saint Lucy, fierce strength. Don't know anything about who Saint Lucy is. The imagery is kind of cool. Saint Jude, saving grace. I know Saint Jude. Oh, interesting. Is that how? Oh, okay. So some cards, the back is blue, and some cards, the back is kind of that brown. So it's probably a saint versus a mystic. Yes, Saint Paul, Leonardo da Vinci. So just noticing that as well. That's really cool. Okay. So Saint Paul is sacred visions. Leonardo da Vinci, inspiration. So didn't we already get it? No, we had intuition and we had initiations, and now we have inspiration. Edgar Casey, Messages. Of course, I know Edgar Casey, the Sleeping Prophet. Saint Martin Caballero, Spiritual Pilgrimage. Interesting. King Solomon, Legacy. Know all about King Solomon. Aristotle, Idealism. Confucius, Wisdom. Familiar with Confucius. Socrates, Divine Connections. And Saint Anthony, Reclaim. Okay, so in true Stacy style, we are going to shuffle up this deck and see how this deck wants to work with you, if you want to work with this deck. And right off the hop, I'm going to tell you, I don't think this deck is going to stay in my collection, not because it's a bad deck, but just because as I'm working through it with you right now, I'm realizing that there really is no connection for me. But if you want to work with this deck, if this deck calls to you and you're really drawn to the imagery and the messages, and like I said, the suggestion of learning about these mystics and these saints, this deck is going to help you to discover more about them and to discover more about yourself. In terms of guidance, I would say this deck is going to always point you in a direction, lead you to another place for more information, further study, further research. I would recommend, if you're going to work with this deck, that you want to work with this deck in combination with another deck so that you can get a little more in-depth information and guidance and insight into your situation and your issue. From an image perspective, you can definitely read this card intuitively. You're seeing, that there's a telescope here. He's got a feather in his hand. There's a globe. There's a book, an old kind of like a recipe book or information book. There are potions here. There's a prism that he's working with. He's working under the night sky. There's a lot of imagery here that you can use from an intuitive perspective and to pull information and to pull guidance from. So if you are called to this particular deck, I feel like that's what it's going to invite you to do. And I would encourage you to find other decks to work in combination with this one so that when you are pulling the keyword, you're also getting a second layer of what that actually means, or what area of your life you're going to be discovering, or that you need to take a little more time to explore, if that makes sense. All right, guys, that is our Saints and Mystics Reading Cards Guidebook from Andre and Gracia. And as always, it's so much fun to connect with you guys in this way. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop a like, put some comments in there. Let me know what you thought about this deck. If it's something that you would like to work with, something where you think, Stacy, you are crazy. How could you not enjoy this deck? How could you not connect to this deck? Let's have a conversation about it. I also, if you want to keep the conversation going and go a little deeper in some guidance, I'm now able to offer memberships through my YouTube channel. So click the join button to check out the 3 options that I have. Would love to be able to connect with you in that way, or any other way that you are feeling called to work with me. Let's do this crazy wild ride life together. Until I see you for another episode of Divinely Decked, sending you lots of love and support. We will see you on the flip side, and transform well. That's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. It was great to connect with you guys. Please like, subscribe, and comment for more content like this. And feel free to follow me on Blue Sky for even more content every single day. Can't wait to see you guys next week for another installment of Black Feather Couture, Divining the VIP Life.